The name on the marquee has got to be Vadim Nemkov, who this past weekend defeated Corey. What's his nickname now?
Overtime?
That's right, Overtime. Corey Overtime Anderson by unanimous decision. Mark, let me throw it over to you first. What was your reaction to Nemkov getting it done unanimously over the very tough and talented Corey Anderson? Never quits. What was your reaction?
Well, that was a significantly different fight from the first one. It's wild how MMA can be. It really is. It's after you watch that first fight, of course you weren't like ruling out Vadim Nemkov, but you could not pick Vadim Nemkov. You couldn't. He got like outclassed in every facet of that fight. And he comes in here and arguably wins every round of the fight. He at least won like 4 of them, I would say. So I think that was the best version of Vadim Nemkov that there is, that we've seen. He fought a perfect fight. I think getting to be in there with Corey for 15 minutes and game plan off of that ended up being a huge, huge factor for him, which I said last week I was afraid of that. But when I was picking Corey again, just you never know how guys are able to adjust. And it seemed like once Vadim got a sense of the way Corey moves and the way he enters, that he was able to just come up with a game plan that neutralized Corey. And he was incredible. Incredible to the point that the improvements in his takedown D borderline didn't even make sense. Like, he went from looking vulnerable in that department to impenetrable. I think the number was like 0 of 17 or something. I don't even remember. It was some high number like that in takedown attempts for Corey, and 0 were successful. I think Corey also looked a little sloppier. He didn't have the greatest entries. I don't know if he just expected it to be easier after the first fight, and then when it wasn't, he was kind of thrown off. To his credit, he never caved. He never went away. He went for it all along. But without the takedowns, his game is just not going to work against guys this good, because he needs those takedowns, obviously, A, to take it to the ground where he's a beast, but B, to open up his striking. And without that, he wasn't going to win a striking match with Vadim Nemkov. It went well for him last time because he got Nemkov so concerned about the takedown because he knew he was dead every time it hit the mat. This time, Nemkov, after a bit, was like, I'm straight. Like, he's not getting me down. You could tell. And the striking started to go more and more Nemkov's way. So that was the story of the fight, really. He forced Corey into a striking match, and the biggest weapons in that striking match were Nemkov's left jab, Nemkov's straight right, and his calf kicks. Those were what played the factor all fight long. So he took a clear decision on the cards, made a big statement about where he stands in the landscape of today's light heavyweight division, and marches onward as the champ and puts $1 million in his pocket.
Yeah, the event that Mark is alluding to was earlier this year at Bellator 277, the clash between Nemkov and Corey Anderson, where it ended in a no contest due to an accidental clash of heads. But I would agree with Mark that I think that Corey Anderson was looking better throughout that fight before that clash of heads. Omar, let me bring you in here now. Did you have a reaction to Nemkov looking better than ever, as Mark said, and getting it done, retaining the world championship?
You don't really see stuff like that very often, where one guy adjusts so heavily that he's able to essentially dominate the fight after essentially having been dominated himself. I thought it was a great performance. The calf kicks I thought were specifically fantastic to point out. They crippled Corey's movement, dropped him a couple times at least, and the straights. You know, a lot of guys in general, when you fight, tend to like to rely on hooks and big power shots. Nemkov relied a lot on straight down the pipe shots, a lot of slipping shots, right? Just moving his head back just a little bit, slipping him, and then coming back with the counter shot. His timing was on point, where Corey just kind of seemed like a step behind. So I don't want to take anything away from Nemkov because the performance was fantastic, but it does make you wonder whether there's something off about Corey in the second fight. Was there something off about Nemkov in the first fight? Because the fight just seemed like they, in both regards, like they were two different people fighting. Like the Nemkov versus Corey 1 were two very different guys that ended up showing up in Nemkov Corey 2. So it does beg a lot of different questions, but the performance from Nemkov is A1.
Yeah,
it was
right.
so different that as I was watching, I was like, "Is this guy juiced or something? Like, how is this so different?" And I pulled up pictures of the first fight and compared his body, and I was like, "Nah, he looks the same." Like, but it was like that different. But I actually think I forgot to point out the main point I wanted to make was Nemkov's footwork. I feel like that was the adjustment he made to counter Corey's takedown game. It just seemed like he was always one step out of space every time Corey tried to close it, and he would catch Corey stepping in as he sidestepped and hit Corey with a straight. It seemed like the footwork was too complicated for Corey to get it down and to counter it. And I meant to say that when I was talking about the improvements that Nemkov made.
Well, congrats to him. Want to say about where Nemkov goes from here, Mark?
Sure, and also I want to point out that Nemkov trained at American Top Team for this one, which apparently, so he's part of Fedor's team, as we know. But he went to American Top Team supposedly, specifically, to train against people with a freestyle wrestling style like Corey has, as opposed to the more sambo-based or whatever he may be seeing in Russia. So that was a smart move. He said he loved it there, so I wonder if Vadim Nemkov could possibly become maybe a two-team type of guy, splits his time. Not really sure how that would work, but Nemkov with ATT behind him is pretty interesting. As for the next, we saw it. They brought my man Yoel Romero into the cage. There was rumors, of course, Yoel threw it out there himself, that he wanted to fight Johnny Eblen down at middleweight. It sounded like he was committing to cut down. I don't know what happened behind the scenes, but obviously they convinced him, you know what, stay right here. We want you to fight for the light heavyweight title instead of the middleweight. And he gets a huge fight with Vadim Nemkov. And me and Omar were saying it before the show started. He walked in the cage. He's supposed to be 3 inches shorter than Vadim. I don't know if he had on big boots or something, but he looked like he was like bigger than Vadim, or at least the same size. It looked like they were a perfect matchup when they were standing across from each other.
Nice. Cool, man. Can't wait to see that one, right?
Yeah, we'll see if Yoel can make the wrestling more of a story than Corey could, or if Nemkov has just figured it out defensively that well.
Omar, any thoughts of what that matchup could look like?
I mean, the last performance from Yoel, I thought, was one of his better ones in recent memory. I mean, he was active, he was wrestling, he was putting it all together very, very well. A lot of times, in my opinion, Yoel's had a real problem using his wrestling effectively. To me, he wastes a lot of energy doing a lot of big actions that don't actually give him any kind of advantage in the fight overall.
There's no way Yoel Romero is 5'9", bro. There's just no way.
He just seems so much bigger.
He's one of those where I'm not sure that height is accurate, because he really looked like he was about the same size as Nemkov.
Yeah. But anyway, Yoel Romero there have been times where I feel like Yoel Romero's actions are less than efficient, but I thought his last performance was really fucking good. So I'm actually excited to see what he can do against Nemkov, especially now that Nemkov has shown this performance against Corey Anderson. It just makes it that much more interesting.
Yeah, man. Yeah. Any thoughts about Anderson, Mark, of where Overtime Anderson goes from here?
I feel like there's a slam dunk choice.
Hit me.
It's gotta be Phil Davis, right? Like, it feels wrong that these guys have somehow never been matched up in either the UFC or Bellator.
Tremendous.
And they're both like right there outside of the title picture. I honestly think that Bellator books that one right away. I think that's the obvious move.
Tremendous matchup. I mean, that's just great matchmaking from stylistically. It'd be very exciting.
Damn, Phil Davis must have just exited as Corey Anderson was coming up or something.
I know, dude. When I thought about it in my head, I was like, they must have fought in the UFC, and I had to literally pull it up, and I was like, wow, they really didn't.
No way. Yeah,
I couldn't remember it, but I was like, I must be forgetting.
Yeah.
Okay, let's move on. Congrats to Vadim Nemkov for defending his title. Great performance over the very talented Corey Anderson. I've never been a fan of Corey Anderson as a fighter. I just have to say, like, he never, all his time in the UFC, he never won me over as a fan of, like, man, I can't wait to see him fight again. But every interview I've ever seen with this man has won me over more and more as just a fan of him as a person. Like, the most American blue-collar story that you can even imagine. Like, if you haven't heard it, Just imagine the most American blue-collar story, and then it's more than that. Of just like his dad, he was like a roofer for his dad's company, and his dad was like, "You can't go work out, but you're gonna work on this roof in July, and that's your workout, son." And he was like, "Okay, Dad." And he's like, "That's how he got strong as like a teenager." Anyway,
I don't know his story. That's interesting.
yeah, super hardworking guy, super humble. I feel so happy for him that he joined Bellator. He has never disclosed numbers, but it sounds like joining Bellator is what really changed his life in terms of financially.
It's tough because I was similar to you. Like in the UFC, obviously he was good. He had beaten some top guys over there. But I was never like, oh, man, Corey Anderson, like same as you. It was in this Bellator run where I had really started to be like, holy shit, Corey Anderson has figured it out. Like he really started to look dominant. And then he's literally 4 seconds away from becoming champ, having Nemkov on his resume, and getting $1 million. 4 seconds away. If he hadn't told the ref about the headbutt, the round ends, they see the cut, it goes to a decision after 3 rounds, and Corey wins the decision. That's what would have happened. So it sucked that he was so close and had looked so good, and it really felt like it was like Corey has reached this big moment, and then he kind of fell flat on Friday. So we'll see how he bounces back.
Yeah, man.